guys, so I'm just going to be showing the process of putting this 2013 BRZ engine into my 2013 FRS right here. So yeah. Alright, this is what the engine looks like now that it's unpacked, and the first step is we're going to jack up the car and put it on jack stands. My car's lowered a little bit, and I can't fit the jack directly under the front bumper, so I just jacked it up from the side a little. And put some pieces of wood underneath the front tire, and now my jack will fit underneath to jack the front end up. Alright, we're now up on 4 jack stands, and the next thing to do is drain the engine oil. Going underneath the car, mine looks a little different because I don't have the plastic skid plates that normally come on this car. But either way, we're just gonna locate our oil drain, which is right here, and unbolt that. Mine's a 17 millimeter because I had to replace it. I'm not sure what size stock is, but just go ahead and unbolt that and drain out all the engine oil. After that finished draining, I just put the bolt back on, and now we're gonna move to draining the coolant. So now I'm on the passenger side of the car, and we're gonna drain our coolant from right here. So this is where it comes out of, so you need to get a tube and just connect it right there. And I have my catch pan. So after loosening this little screw that was right there, it was barely draining at all out of the tube. So I ended up just taking it all the way out, and it made a bit of a mess because it's not a direct stream, but it worked. As that's draining, I'm gonna disconnect the battery, and I'm gonna start with the negative side, and this is a 10 millimeter wrench. Okay, in the engine bay, the battery is now taken out and set to the side, and now I'm gonna be removing these 2 metal bars right here, which are held in by 4 12 millimeter bolts each. Another thing is that you might need a stool for this job if you're short, because now that the car is jacked up, the engine bay is pretty high. Anyways, I just finished removing the 2 bolts from this side and the other, and now we could freely take this off. And I'm just gonna be putting these back where we found them. That way when we reassemble everything, it's not hard to find. For the air intake, there's 2 10 millimeter bolts, one right here and one right here. And then I just pulled this off. And there's another bolt right here, which I used a Phillips screwdriver to unscrew. And then another 10 millimeter bolt right here, which I'm using a deep socket to remove. After taking these 2 bolts out, you could just pull this hose right off. I'm now removing this little hose fastener with some pliers and just pulling that down, and then we could pull this hose apart. This hose is now disconnected. I just had to pull hard, and now there's this wiring to the alternator that we're gonna take off so we can remove the rest of the air intake. So if you just pull this rubber boot off, there's a 10 millimeter nut that I unscrewed, and then we could take this part off, and this green clip, there's this little tab on the back side. Just squeeze that and pull off hard. And then for this clip, there's another tab right here, which you're gonna pull towards you. So pull out and then up, and now this is off. I'm also going to be labeling some parts as I go along, just so I don't get too lost in the process of putting it all back together. So I'm just labeling them with numbers, and then I could match up the spots on my original engine to my new engine when I connect them. To finish taking off this air intake, there's one clip right here, which you're just gonna push down right here and pull out. And then there's also this little metal seal that has a flathead screw right there, so you just unscrew that, get it loose, and then we'll be able to pull this off. Alright, the air intake is now fully out. We have a lot more room, so I'm gonna be now disconnecting the AC compressor. I'm not gonna touch the hoses, I'm just gonna unbolt it and move it to the side. That way I don't have to get them decharged or anything. So first I'm gonna take off this cap, which has two 10mm bolts, and then it has this little clip. Take that out, and then another clip on this side that this hose went to. So just pull that clip out, take this off, and then there's three 14mm bolts holding this AC compressor in. There's one right there, and then another one back there. Another thing to do to remove this AC compressor is you have to take off the serpentine belt. So to do that, grab a 14mm wrench and you're gonna attach it to this tensioner right here, and you're gonna pull it this way with a lot of force, and it'll loosen up the serpentine belt so you could take it off. I'll go ahead and do that. Alright, it's off, so we can remove this. Alright, that's out. And now we can unbolt those three 14mm holding the AC compressor in. That AC compressor is giving me a really hard time, so I'm gonna come back to it, and now I'm gonna take off this radiator hose, just two Phillips head screws, and you could pull this hose off. Alright, I got that hose off and some coolant leaked out when I pulled it off. And now we're gonna be disconnecting these fuel injectors. So I got these little disconnecting tools, and I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Gas is also supposed to leak out of these when you do that, so I'm gonna put some towels down. These fuel lines are now disconnected, and it was honestly pretty hard to get them undone. The plastic clips I had earlier didn't end up working, so I went back to the store and I got these metal ones, which were a lot more sturdy, but it was still difficult to get them off. So the issue is that there's this metal ring around the fuel line which prevents you from putting this clip underneath this green plastic part. So it looks like that, and this metal ring basically prevents you from putting a small enough diameter clip onto the line. So what ended up working is taking two of these clips, the 5/16 size and the 1/4 size, and we basically just open them both up like this, so we could jam each side of the cylindrical part into underneath this green plastic. And so with those jammed in, we just pushed down and yanked really hard on the hose, and we were able to get those undone. So that was for these two, and this middle one was really easy. You just take some pliers, squeeze, and pull really hard to get those off. With the help of my dad, we were also able to finally get the 3 bolts off this AC compressor. So the only thing left is this tiny clip on top, which you just push this down and pull. And now we can move this AC compressor out of the way. Alright, moving towards the back of the engine, there's the clutch sleeve cylinder right here, which has two 14mm bolts that I used this extension to get to. So we're just gonna undo those. Alright, these are now unbolted and we can move the slave cylinder to the side. Also to note with the slave cylinder is to not touch this clutch line back here. Don't unscrew that because if you do, the brake fluid will leak out and you'll have to refill it and bleed the clutch system. So just unbolt the sides to avoid that. Alright, so now on the back passenger side of the engine, we're going to be disconnecting these wires. So for this gray one right here, you're just going to push the tabs on the sides right here, and that's how it disconnects. Wiggle it out. And then this white one, how this one disconnects is there's a tab on this side right here, right there. So this tab, you push down really hard, and then that's how you pull it out of there. So that's on that back side. And then for this big one right here, it looks like this when it's connected. So what you do is you grab a flathead screwdriver and you put it in the space in right here. When this is connected, there's a tiny space right there, that divot. You put it in and then you pop it out to the side. And then that's how this gray piece pops out. And then you're gonna pull it back, and then this whole back unit will pull out. Okay, with some wiggling, this whole back piece came out, and now we're gonna disconnect this little clip right here. So there's a tab on the side right there. You pull that out, and then you're gonna pull up. Okay, so here's that clip disconnected right there. And after that, you want to remove this little piece. It goes in that hole right there. You just push the tabs on the inside. I used some small pliers, and then you could pull it out from right there. After that, we're going to start removing these bolts. Those are two 14mm and then two 10mm. And that'll give us access to the starter underneath, and we could disconnect that. Those bolts are now off, and this plate that had the 10mm on it, I could just take it out, and this plate with the 14mm, I can move that around. And so now this big wiring harness we can move up and out of the way and get to the starter wiring harness. Alright, so this is the starter wiring harness. This is the starter. So it just has a couple wire connections. This one right there, it's real easy to take off. You just push this back clip and pull off, and then you follow this up, and it's right here. And then this is another one of the tabs that you pull out and up, and then it's also connected back here. So I'm just gonna push this down, probably with some pliers, and then I'll be able to pull that out. So following this starter harness, the last clip is located right there, and I honestly don't know how to take it off the right way because I broke the plastic trying to take it off. But yeah, that is the last part, and then the starter splits off into the battery terminals. Back to the actual starter. So it just has that one little black clip that we disconnected, and then it has its own little rubber boot right here, and then when you take that off, there's another nut that connects all these wires to the starter. So we're gonna have to take that nut off to get this disconnected. But to get the actual starter disconnected, there's two 14mm bolts, one right there, and then another one down here, holding the starter to the transmission right there. The starter is now out, and what we ended up doing was taking off the wiring harness first by moving the rubber boot and undoing this 12mm nut right there. But just be careful when you take it off because it has a washer under it, and we dropped it and can't find it now. Anyways, after we undid that, we were able to move the wires out of the way. which gave us access to the two 14 millimeters on the top and bottom. So we just unscrewed those, and the 14 millimeter on the bottom, so this is where that 12 millimeter nut was with the boot, but the 14 millimeter on the bottom has this whole metal connection to it, so make note of how exactly that goes in before you reconnect your starter. Anyway, so I'm just gonna follow this wiring now, and I see that it's connected to the positive battery terminal right here, so I'm gonna undo this nut, and then it's also connected to the negative battery terminal right there, and has this little wire right there. So I'm gonna disconnect all of that so I can pull the engine so it's not stuck to the car. I forgot to mention that we needed this like movable ratchet to reach the top bolt on the starter, but anyways, I just connected the wires to the battery terminals, and they were just each held in by a 12 millimeter nut, and then this black little wire was held in by a 10 millimeter. I'm going to undo these two hoses back here now, just by taking some small pliers and squeezing this little metal clamp. On the driver's side, there's another hose right here, and it just has this metal clamp that I'll undo with some pliers. I'm gonna be taking off the exhaust manifold now, so I just disconnected these 202 sensors, and then I'll go under the car. So there's 6 bolts holding in this exhaust manifold, 3 on each side. So on the driver's side, there's 1, 2, and 3. And then on the passenger side, it's the same thing. And you want to also undo the bolts to this overpipe. But in my case, one of these bolts is actually welded on, it looks like. So I think we're gonna have to cut this to get the manifold off. On the passenger side, my dad was able to cut through this overpipe for me, so thank you to my dad for that. And now I can take off this exhaust manifold and pull it out of the car. So yeah, it's just 3 14 millimeter nuts on each side, and this is just WD-40 that I had sprayed earlier to loosen up the nuts. And I'm gonna be using this extension to reach these nuts. With those nuts removed and this overpipe cut, I was able to get the exhaust manifold out. Also, be sure to wear eye protection when you're working under the car, just so nothing gets in your eyes. But now I'm just gonna be removing this radiator hose and draining it, and it just has a Phillips head screw right here. This radiator hose is now done draining, so I'm just gonna put a glove to cover each side of this tubing. That way, if there's extra left in there, it doesn't spill out everywhere when I'm pulling out the engine. So that's done, and now we just have 2 grounds on each side of the engine that are held in by 10 millimeter bolts, but both mine were already snapped, so I don't have to take those off, but take those off on each side. I've just moved the wires out of the way, tubing out of the way, and it looks like that's everything that's connected to this engine. So I'm just gonna hook up the cherry picker now, which I also have this leveler for, and I'm gonna hook this up before I start undoing the engine mounts and all that. And I'm also gonna jack up the transmission before I undo those bell housing bolts. Alright, I have this engine hoist hooked up now. I just bolted one of these onto where the AC compressor was, and then on the back side I put these 14 millimeter bolts back into this plate right here and hooked one of the points up to that bolt. So that's connected, and now that that's connected, I'm gonna undo the bell housing bolts and the engine mount bolts, and Also, I have the transmission jacked up underneath the car. Okay, so I'm underneath the transmission, and I'm pretty sure I got all the bell housing bolts out. There was one right here, and then I believe we took out some with the starter, and they're all 14 millimeter. And then there was a couple on this side. There was two up top, and then one down here. And then also there was two nuts, also 14 millimeter right here with washers on either side. And now I'm just gonna do the motor mounts. So it's one nut on each side and also 14 millimeter. So I'll do those, and I think we should be able to pull the engine after. Alright, so everything should be disconnected from this engine. I got all the bell housing bolts, the motor mounts, everything's disconnected up top. So I think what's left is there's two studs that poke out of the transmission into the engine. So I'll have to pull it forward before I can pull it up. So yeah, I'm gonna try to get this engine out. You can already see the gap forming between the engine and the transmission right here. So I'm gonna try to go around and just pry it all very carefully. Alright, so after a lot of prying and basically just pulling the engine forward to get the transmission off the two studs at the bottom of the engine, we were able to break it loose and pull it out. And there is on the old tire. But yeah, we didn't have to take the hood off. We ended up just tying it back with a bungee cord, as you can see right there. And that gave us enough room for the cherry picker to pull it up and out. So, yep, that's it.